My name is Shauna Brandon. I am the Rural Development Specialist at the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture. I have been working in the area of agritourism and rural tourism for quite many years. ECO, we have been involved with agritourism, trying to assist rural communities, farmers, sensitize tourism authorities as to the possibilities of rural tourism. I have gone on training courses myself that have focused on rural tourism in Latin America, in Costa Rica and Argentina. I more recently developed an online course for rural tourism, which was delivered to interested persons across the Caribbean. And we actually had just over 300 persons graduating from that online course earlier this year. So it's a topic that is near and dear to my heart. And I am very happy to make this presentation to the St. Kitts and Nevis edition of the Academy. And I know you're on the last leg. So, thank you for sticking through the various courses. And I do hope today's session will be of benefit to you. So we're going to do a presentation. Essentially, this is an introduction to agritourism. Why my screen is not moving. Okay. All right, so I'm going to show you the presentation outline. So we'll discuss what is agritourism, the potential benefits of agritourism linkages, improving the supply of local agricultural products to the agritourism sector, which essentially is one element of agritourism linkages. And then the second element being the reverse, bringing tourism to rural areas and farming locations. We will look at trends towards alternatives to traditional tourism, how you can use your farm or rural community as a tourism destination, and tips on developing and executing your idea if you have an interest in developing a rural or farm tourism venture. And then finally, we'll close with some agritourism examples in the Caribbean. So essentially, what is agritourism? Well, at ECO, we see agritourism as a promotion of increased linkages between the agriculture and tourism sector. So agriculture really is our core business, but we recognize that tourism is the dominant industry in the Caribbean, and the tourism provides significant market opportunities for agriculture and rural communities. And this can comprise the supply of local products to the tourism sector or, as I mentioned earlier, taking tourism into rural areas. And so just to kind of look at a snapshot of how important tourism is to the world economy. So tourism contributes 10% of world GDP, and it generates 1 in 10 jobs and accounts for 7% of exports globally. And you can find this information on the United Nations World Tourism Organization site, that's UNWTO. I have the link there, and the presentation can be shared. Your coordinator has a copy of this presentation if persons are interested. But just to show you that tourism is very important to the world economy. And so there's a quote from the organization that says, today the business volume of tourism equals or even surpasses that of oil exports, food products, or automobiles. So if you thought that tourism was a little side thing, it's extremely big business, not just where we are in the Caribbean, but across the world. And then worse, in the Caribbean, we are extremely dependent on the tourism sector. So for several Caribbean countries, tourism accounts for over 60% of GDP. And if you look at the graph here at the side, and if you look at the countries towards the left of the graph, where you have the highest blue bars, the majority of them are in the Caribbean. So for example, St. Kitts and Nevis is here at number 16, and number 17 right behind you, where I am from, is Jamaica. So we're really in the Caribbean very dependent on tourism. And so one of the reasons that the Caribbean has become so dependent on tourism is because there has been a decline in agriculture, right? And that is one of the reasons why we need to address linkages between agriculture and tourism, because we have on one end a sector that is booming, and then on the other end, a sector that is declining. And if we are able to more closely marry the two, then I think it will spell, you'll have greater fortune for the agricultural sector. So essentially, agricultural development in the Caribbean has not kept pace, right? We know that the sector has suffered from several shocks, hurricanes, falling prices, international competition. Countries in the region are depend on a very narrow range of export crops. There's limited access to financial resources. Stakeholders in the agricultural sector are very small, and as such, they're fragmented. And all of this we are seeing increasing food imports. So, with that, you're kind of seeing kind of a lopsided scale between agriculture and tourism. And so if we strengthen the linkages between agriculture and tourism, we could see, or we could be creating platforms, or we will be creating platforms for the expansion of the sales of agricultural commodities, because tourism represents a huge market for the sale of agricultural output. You would help to diversify farm income, create jobs, and this is particularly the case for youth and women, because you will see that tourism ventures provide a lot of opportunities for youth and women, maybe even more so sometimes than farming. It provides opportunities for adding value to local produce. There's an opportunity to promote community collaboration and partnership, and it helps to revalue the rural way of life and build local pride. And what I mean by that, sometimes it takes an outsider to come into your territory and recognize the value of the territory that you who have been there, your forefathers, etc., take for granted what is around, all of the assets and the resources that would be attractive to a visitor. But someone from the outsider comes in and sees the value and almost shows the community the value that they are taking for granted. And then finally, it boosts the tourist offer. I mean, in a lot of countries, we have a tourism sector that is very dependent on sun, sand, and sea. And so agritourism, rural tourism provides another dimension to the tourism product that the country can offer. And so when we look at one of the first elements of creating linkages between agriculture and tourism, one of the most obvious things is how do we increase the supply of local farm produce to the tourism market, right? And there are a lot of challenges that occur that create hurdles, for want of a better word, for there to be greater supply from local supply to the tourism market. So some of the challenges are hotels sometimes complain that there is inadequate quality and consistency of supply. There is a major issue in relation to insufficient post-harvest knowledge and skills and infrastructure. There's also poor supply chain logistics for the distribution of agricultural commodities to the hotel sector. There's need to incentivize local sourcing through the sensitization of chefs, information exchange, and then agriculture and tourism don't necessarily speak the same language, right? So for example, tourism expects that there will be year-round access to the same food items, while several agricultural products and sectors are seasonal. So there's need to have that level of dialogue. So the hospitality sector can understand what is available and when, and possibly base their menus on seasonality, right? So the hotels also in the region, they have gotten larger. They are increasingly comprised within an international chain that uses coordinated international supply systems, vis-a-vis the agricultural sector that has small-scale suppliers that are often fragmented and uncoordinated, right? So you see the myriads of challenges that we need, or the hurdles. It's almost like you're running not even a 100-meter hurdles race, you're running a 400-meter hurdles race. And there's just a series of hurdles that you have to jump over to be able to just supply just even the hotels in your own country, right? But it's a race that is worth running, and we have to make an effort to run that race. I am going to mention, for example, some of the strategies that we have to look at. So we have to, there has to be more dialogue, right? We need to communicate with the hotels, find out their product needs, find out the quality specs, allow them to understand the seasonality, sensitize the chefs to the benefits of serving local dishes. You know that is an increasing trend in the hospitality sector, the benefits of fresh and so forth. And then from the farm perspective, there's a need to plant according to market needs, implement agronomic practices that enhance post-harvest quality. So the hotels can't tell you that there's not sufficient quality or that the food is spoiling, right? Consider issues with traceability. Food safety is a big issue. You remember the hotels, a lot of them are owned and operated by entities in first world countries that have higher food safety requirements than that is often the case than in the Caribbean. And then there may be need to experiment with new crops and new growing systems. And then there's the issue of post-harvest management, the need for sufficient management to reduce spoilage. How do you aggregate small farmer output? That is something that we need a lot more discussion on, as well as adequate storage prior to distribution. And then the whole system of supply chain logistics. How do you understand the hotel purchasing and receival process, right? And that continuous feedback dialogue to assess whether hotels are satisfied with the supply that they receive. I want to pause here because I just realized that in my introduction, I kind of just went into my presentation and I did not ask anyone to introduce themselves and to say what their interests are, nor did I indicate that you are free to ask questions, right? So at varying sections throughout my presentation, I'm going to pause and see if there are any comments or questions on what I have said. And this is the first of my pauses to find out if anyone has any comments, particularly from the angle of if you are in the farming sector, if you're farming, and any thoughts or any experience as it relates to supplying the tourism sector or the hospitality sector. So does anyone have any comments or questions that they would like to share? Please don't be shy. I might just call out people. I see there are 35 participants on this. Okay, I have the first person. Is this Miss Fraser, Tracy Fraser?
Yes, it is.
Please go ahead.
What I noticed with the tourist and agriculture is when we had COVID, the farmers were very dependent and the fishers were very dependent on the local people because the hotels were closed. And the farmers used us as their tourists, basically. And once the tourist season picked back up again, we're not getting the good stuff, as we would say, or as much as we used to. So the Tories, the farmers and the fishers and all those do depend heavily on the tourist season that we have here, especially the hotels and the restaurants. And when there is a problem with storm or whatever the case may be, COVID, that's when the farmers have to have a backup plan, which is us. But they have to also remember once you come to us, come back again. Now they've gone back to the hotels and not coming back to the restaurants. Some of the local restaurants are not getting what they were getting from the fishermen, especially when we had COVID. So they said it's changed. Some restaurants honestly it has changed since COVID. They're not getting as much as they used to from the local farmers and fishermen.
Okay, but tell me, so based on what you have said, though, it would appear that there is no challenges to local farmers supplying the hotel market, the hotel sector in St. Kitts and Nevis. In other words, I know in some countries they will say that there's a clear challenge. It's not easy to get local produce produced into the hotels, but that's not the case in St. Kitts and Nevis.
No, I think it's a case sometimes because we tend to produce all the farmers. We tend to produce all the same things. So we have watermelons at the same time, sweet potatoes at the same time, and things like that. So we tend to produce all the same thing. Sometimes you'll find that the hotels will take most, and then the local restaurants cannot get the bulk, and then they have to go and do shopping at the supermarket. But I think they might be get a better rate of pay from the hotel, so they will go to them first and see what they have, what they want. But obviously, they still buy from overseas because a lot of things we can't do here. But
Okay.
I think that's the problem because most of our farmers, you'll get people coming into my office and they'll have sweet potato. There's a man will come in with sweet potato as well. So our crop rotation, it seems to be the same. I don't know if it's the time of year or the season or whatever. I'm not too sure.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you, Ms. Fraser. Is someone else?
Yes, can I say something?
Yes.
Sometimes the farmers are not consistent in producing the produce also. That's why the hotels will have to lead to the more international importation of foods also. So that's another thing why we might find it difficult to sell to the hotels also.
Okay. So as I would have mentioned, consistency of supply is an issue.
Yes.
That's what you're saying. Is there anyone on this in this session who has had any experience selling to the hotel sector?
Yes, I do. I normally sell to Montpelier, Golden Rock, and a few of the hotels on the island. But those will be during, you would have to have a link in that hotel in a sense to get your produce in there. It's kind of difficult.
Okay, so you're saying that if you did not have a link, then it might be a challenge. And I see where someone has said it is easy to supply the hotels if you have a farmer ID.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter if you have a farmer ID. It might not be so easy. It doesn't
matter if you have a farmer ID or not, because the thing is that what they normally say is that they might have ordered their stuff maybe 2 weeks prior. And then you come in with your items, there is no need for it. The linkage in terms of the person inside can then hint to you, well, okay, they will be in need of this. So come this time with it.
Okay. So any other thoughts from, say, St. Kitts and Nevis, where you sit, your experience between, the situation between farmers supplying to the hotels, some of what needs to occur? Because, there's I would have spoken to the general situation across the Caribbean, but sometimes there tends to be some country-specific solutions. I don't want to spend too much time on this point, but most of my presentation is going to be looking at the rural tourism side. But on the issue of supplying to hotels, I just wanted to see, before I move on to the next topic, if there are any thoughts on what needs to occur in your country, in St. Kitts and Nevis. Anybody else? Oh, sorry,
Sorry.
continue.
My thoughts on it is that it goes back to the field officers in agriculture basically going around. Well, they do go around, but it's not always the farmers don't always comply in terms of suggestions, in terms of what the officer is saying to them to plant. As Ms. Fraser said earlier, it's a tendency that one farmer see you planting watermelons, they see you making good money off of it, and then they go and plant watermelons, and the whole system is flooded with watermelons. So I'm thinking that if it's controlled in terms of what is planted, then it make it easier for the government to say, okay, for example, Rams or whatever hotel, we have this amount of food on the island for this time period. So there will be no importation on watermelon, for example. Unless it's controlled in that way, it will always be an issue.
Okay, thank you. And I noticed Ms. Fraser has added a point in the chat to say that you have to notify them that you have the produce so that they don't order. So they essentially, I think she's saying that there has to be an established relationship. I see an Akeisha Fergus. I think you're unmuted. Did you want to speak? Do you want to give a comment?
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize
So you did not have a comment? Does anybody else have a comment as to their familiarity with the situation in terms of supplying to the hotel sector, or based on what they have heard, what they would suggest, you know, could be done if there's need for any improvements? No, not yet. All right. Okay, so I will move on then if there are no other comments at this time. But essentially to close that, even though local produce is supplied to the hotels, there are gaps that need to be strengthened. Okay. So the flip of this coin is how you bring tourists now into rural communities, which is what we refer to as rural tourism, which according to the United Nations World Tourism Organization definition, rural tourism can be defined as tourist activities that are carried out in the rural area and that aim to interact with rural life, to know the traditions and the way of life of the people and the attractions of the area and the product that is offered. And so rural tourism has a couple of facets. Starting from my left-hand side, you have rural heritage. There's a lot of heritage in rural areas, and sometimes you'll find that there's more heritage in a rural area than there is in urban areas, because rural areas are more traditional. Then you have rural activities, the typical activities that you would see occurring in rural areas: farming, fishing, and then because of the landscape, you have opportunities for recreational activities such as cycling and walking. Then there is a rural life, just the things that emanate from what occurs in a rural community. People make different types of food. There are different types of local events. There's, traditional music, crafts, and, depending on your location, there may be other things. And then you talk about the countryside. That's your landscape. Your rivers, hills and mountains, the greenery, the nature, etc. All of these combined together are the various assets that can be offered for the rural tourism community. And so when we look at rural tourism and how it has spread across the world, even though it is still, not necessarily considered mainstream tourism, rural tourism really had its birth in Europe. What would occur is that farmers would rent rooms in their homes, and they promoted the coexistence. Persons coming in, visitors coming in, sharing their homes with families, sharing their homes with with visitors and so forth, their customs with visitors. And so there was generally in Europe a focus on accommodation and exploring the countryside and small towns. And so right here, we see that this is a picture, for example, of well, I think it's the next slide. Let me just double check, of an English bed and breakfast. Yes, yes. And so this activity, rural tourism activity in Europe, it was actually fostered by the governments in Europe because they saw it as a way to diversify farm income. So that they were, they had other opportunities outside of agriculture. And key drivers of the market, key drivers of demand was a desire, particularly for those from urban areas, to connect with heritage and rural lifestyle. And there was an interest in attaining peace and quiet, access to nature, engagement in some of them, etc. So the rural communities became attractive as tourist locations for these very reasons. And so this is, for example, an image of well, you'd have seen an image in the previous slide, but this too is an image of an English bed and breakfast. And accommodation is considered in Europe a very important element of the rural tourism equation. Overnight visitors are very valuable because surveys show that overnight visitors have a higher spending levels than day visitors, and sometimes up to 300% more of the tourism dollar is spent when the visitor stays in the location rather than just goes in and comes out, right? But looking at this image of a English bed and breakfast, you have to think to yourself, you're in St. Kitts and Nevis, what would be the element of a rural stay where you are, or rural accommodation where you are, right? What would make it unique? What would give it that St. Kitts and Nevis stamp, right? Because every territory has its own distinct flavor when you're talking about the rural areas. And now these are some pictures of what we refer to as French gîtes. And a French gîte is a vacation home in rural France for rent. Again, just like a English bed and breakfast would have particular characteristics, a French gîte would also have particular characteristics. And it does give you that sense, almost of that sense of romance. The countryside becomes a romantic location. And so Europe is considered a leader and the largest global provider of rural tourism. There is an association called Eurogîtes. It's an umbrella group comprising 28 organizations from 25 countries, and they market and lobby on behalf of rural tourism operators in Europe. Eurogîtes.
Sorry, excuse me, but I think
Sure.
The internet just logged you out, so let me briefly, maybe about a few seconds of what you said.
Oh, okay. So just repeat one or two of the points.
Yes, please.
Okay, all right. I'm sorry about that. Okay, so I was just speaking about the umbrella association for the European Umbrella Association for Rural. It comprises 28 organizations from 25 countries, and they market and lobby on behalf of rural tourism operators. It's estimated that rural tourism supports 900,000 direct and indirect jobs in Europe and generates 150 billion, not million, billion euro in gross income each year. And actually, gîtes, it is the name Eurogîtes is associated with the gîtes, the French gîtes that we would have seen the pictures of just in the previous slide. So Gîtes de France, which is the Rural Tourism Association in France, is actually the largest rural tourism organization within that gîte system, and it is seen to have the greatest diversity of offers. So moving on from Europe, right? So there's a particular characteristic related to rural tourism in the countryside, accommodation in the countryside, and to add to that, somewhat, there's also a focus on national parks as well. Europe is also famous for that. But if we come across the seas and come across the Latin America, you know, it takes on a slightly different characteristic, and we have something what we call agri-food routes, right? Which is popular across Latin America. So an agri-food route, which is also known as rutas, R-U-T-A-S, are tourism routes built around key agricultural products in the region. So, for example, this slide is showing a ruta in Argentina, and specifically a wine route, right? And so this wine route would comprise of, I see someone has raised their hand. Let me just stop for a second.
Yes, hi, good evening. Just one
Good
question. I
evening.
am not too sure.
Sure.
Yes, hi, this is Robertina. I am not
Hi,
too sure if I'm
Robertina.
the only one. I'm not too sure if I'm the only one, but I'm not able to see your slides if you are indeed sharing your slides.
Is anyone not able to see my slides? Anyone else?
I
Can
think
some,
I think it's only you, Robertina. So I recommend that you log out and try logging back in, please.
Okay, all right then. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I would have been most distressed if I had been talking and no one was seeing my slides. So I'm a little bit heartened. I'm sorry, Robertina is not able to see my slides. I'm not sure what's happening. Okay, but thank you, Latoya, for confirming that you are seeing my screen. All right, so as I was mentioning, agri-food routes, essentially these are tourism routes that are built around what they would refer to as iconic agricultural products. And this is an example of a wine route in I'm just checking the chat. Okay, person just commented about the slide. Okay, that they're also seeing the slide. Just want to double check. All right, so this is a wine route in Argentina. And Argentina is the largest producer of wine in South America and fifth largest in the world. And as a result, they're receiving a growing number of tourists relating to specifically for wine tourism. And so in the wine producing belt, they have a few what we call wine routes. And it takes persons through many different elements, wine production and other things that can be associated with it, right? So you have restaurants, you have small hotels, you even have special musical and arts events along the wine route. It allows the wine producers to increase their brand visibility, and it has become a way to increase wine sales. As boutique wineries sometimes record up to 50% of their income from the tourism through these wine routes. And then even the larger wineries have seen a surge in sales due to the influx of tourists to the wine routes, right? So just this is one example of an agritourism route in Latin America. Another popular one is Mexico's what is called it's tequila trail, or La Ruta del Tequila, right? The tequila trail is actually a UNESCO recognized World Heritage Site. So that is how important this particular agri-food route has become. It is really a road network connecting around 8 towns around the Tequila volcano that comprises the principal tequila production areas in Mexico. The route has become a cultural and gastronomic destination and venue for tequila-themed festivals and events. So according to the Mexican Chamber of Commerce, the tequila industry, Mexico Chamber of Commerce for the tequila industry, there were approximately in other words, they see thousands and thousands of visitors to the route each year, right? The steady increase in visitors has resulted in the building of a hotel in the town of Tequila, right? So over the period of time, because it has become so popular, the distilleries, the tequila distilleries, began offering tours and tasting. And so along this tequila route, in addition to the tastings of tequila, you can, there's tequila culture, their crafts, their archaeological sites, and various tourist spots. Visitors have many different options to see, to journey the route. You can do it by bus, you can do it by train, you can do it by motorcycle, or even walk in some sections. So, some of the train rides, they'll have a mariachi band performing, and they have traditional Mexican cuisine, so around tequila production. So you begin to see what is possible. Okay, I see that Robertina is now seeing my slides. I'm very happy to hear that, Robertina. Thanks for the updates. So this is an example of on the side, one of the tequila trains, the tequila route trains, and then the main picture, it gives you a snapshot of what this route looks like and the different spots that people can visit in relation to the tequila route. Okay, so there's another one. Now we're back to Argentina. This is actually called the famous as wine from Argentina or tequila from Mexico. It's a very popular tea that is drunk by Argentinians, and they drink them out of these beautiful mugs that you will see here. And essentially, they sip the tea all day long, and it is so entrenched in Argentinian culture that they, of course, have also developed a yerba mate route, which allows visitors to visit various sites where they learn about the yerba mate production process. So you can visit plantations of yerba mate. You can understand the properties, learn about the aspects of there's apparently a mate ceremony. And it's important to Argentina's daily life. And then, of course, associated with that are restaurants, bars, shops, historical and cultural sites, lodges, camping grounds, hostels, cabins, and the list goes on. In other words, once you build this route around something that is emblematic, and some product, agricultural product or food product that is emblematic, the potential is endless as to what you can add on to those attractions. And then, of course, you have coffee from Colombia, right? This is also a very well-recognized route. It's similarly like the Tequila Trail is on the UNESCO World Heritage List. And there are several coffee plantations that offer accommodation to visitors. And so, you can do plantation tours, you can, and have, involve other attractions and activities such as biking and hiking and visits to reserves and waterfalls. But the central pull is the coffee, as well as there are also festivals and other events. I'm going to pause here before I move on. Are there any comments or questions at this point? Okay, I'm gonna throw out a question then. In St. Kitts and Nevis, if you were to develop some type of food, agri-food route, what product would most jump into your mind? What food product?
Anything to do with mango.
I was gonna
Okay,
say,
somebody was gonna say the same thing?
yes, I was gonna say the same thing, mango.
Okay, okay. Tell me why.
Well, I live in Deep Bay, and over here at the foot of the mountain by us, we have what's called mango gut. And that's
Mango
been
what?
mango gut.
What is mango gut?
GAUT. It's just almost, it's just it's acres on acres of just lush mango trees. And it's actually even dark during the day because the trees are that big and that old. It's been around since my grandmother was a child.
Okay, okay, very interesting, very interesting. Someone has said in the chat, we have a wide variety of mangoes and they're very delicious. And then someone mentioned, I guess in relation to the tequila train that we were just talking about, that the St. Kitts Scenic Railway train comes to mind. Unfortunately, we no longer produce sugar, but at least you have something which is a remnant of that sugar production era that actually does enhance your tourism, because I'm familiar with the St. Kitts Scenic Railway train. But that's very interesting with the mangoes. And I think because how mangoes are so delicious, I do see how that could make a very attractive route, you know. And there's so many things that you can do with mangoes, you know. So I leave it on the table for, you know, if anybody out there has some, you know, really wants to put some ideas into practice, you know, mango. Any other comes to mind? Or we'll just leave it at mango?
Guava. We also do guava cheese, guava jams, things like that. So it's something that I think if we push harder, it can become something bigger.
You could build something around it, so between the mango and the guava. Very interesting, very interesting. That's
Yeah.
why you know, it's interesting for people to kind of look at what other countries are doing and then see how it would apply in their case, right? Thank you very much. And yes, continue.
And also, you can also use the guava leaves into soaps. Like, you know, there's so many different things you could use guava for, but I guess the idea on a wide scale is not there. So yeah.
Okay, but you know, people just need to have the ideas and you know, just be a little enterprise, you know, see what is possible. You know, it's not necessarily an easy road, but it's nice to try something different and, you know, build on what for other persons, you know, what you've seen elsewhere. All right, thank you so much for that input. Okay, so we're now moving on to tourism trends, and you know, essentially what is happening in the tourism industry now, or the market for tourism that makes, you know, the supply or the offer of rural tourism possible, right? And so these are some of the things that are happening. You're getting a sense that persons want to travel to have some kind of change. They want to travel to be able to show people where they have been, what they have done that is different. There's a pursuit of a healthy life. They want to go off the beaten track. They want to take home memorable stories. They want to be engaged, not just participate. You know, they want to be involved, but at the same time, they still want to be safe and comfortable. So but the taste of visitors is changing. So it's opening up possibilities for alternatives to mainstream tourism, right? So you're beginning to see differentiated products. So things like sports tourism, cultural tourism, nature and adventure tourism, rural tourism, all of these are now gaining increasing popularity because the tastes of the travelers are changing, right? People want to learn about places that are new and different from where they are. They want to have interactions with local people, local culture. They want to try different types of food. And the concept that I mentioned about actively participate, not just observe, it is that you want to have an experience rather than a trip, right? And you want to be somewhat immersed in that experience. And so all of these different motivating factors are creating a demand for rural tourism, for something different than the norm. And so, earlier this year, I actually participated in an international conference that was the occasion of the 16th World Agritourism Day. So really and truly, agritourism is not new, right? If this is the 16th World Agritourism Day, I mean, we in the Caribbean may be a little bit late to the dance, but it's happening, and it's happening elsewhere. When you think, we have typically only thought about, say, for example, wine tourism in Italy. But, there are other ways and other territories that that have various types of agricultural tourism or rural tourism. I'm just gonna stop a second because I see a few messages in the chat, right? Our prior conversation about, what could be emblematic products for agri-food roots in St. Kitts and Nevis. Someone mentioned tamarind, right? That you have a lot of sweet and sour tamarind. Tamarind is something that I really like. Someone mentioned sea grapes. That is a bit unusual. Someone mentioned citrus orchards, and mentioned the tamarind jams, the tamarind balls, the tamarind drinks. But as you see, it is nice to get the imagination juices flowing, and you look at what you have, right? That's one of the things about rural tourism. Sometimes it's not immediately apparent what the possibilities are. But if you think a little bit kind of behind the shadows, you see that there are lots of opportunities. Okay. And I just want to, and there's a quote here that is on the screen. And this was a quote that was made it was part of the conference documentation, right? And it says here, and I thought it was such a poignant quote: when the primary sector contributes the least to our GDP and the tertiary sector the most, why not combine the best of both to ensure inclusive growth? And it really does speak to combining agriculture with tourism so that there is more inclusive growth, okay? And I had mentioned in the previous slide, the trends towards why, rural tourism can become so attractive to tourists, is that there was a time, and I'm even speaking from, seeing tourism in my own country, that tourists would come to the same hotel year after year, lie on the same beach, drink the same watered down pina colada year after year, and that would be fine. The younger set of tourists, they're not doing that. Sameness is a thing of the past, right? The new generation of tourists, they want to see something different each time. They want a different experience. And so the market for rural tourism is there if properly executed. Okay. All right, so let me continue. All right, so you've seen some ideas, what happens with rural tourism elsewhere. And so what would it take if you wanted to transform your farm or your rural locality into a tourism destination? And there are different ways in which this can be done. You can have attractions, and these can be tours, adventures, edutainment, heritage. You have offering accommodation. You have health and wellness. It could be part of a route, as we were just talking about in Latin America. So there are various options, and I'm going to put on a video. I'm going to play a video that shows an example of a unique farm tourism site in North America. You just hold a second. Let me try and put this on. All right, I need to make sure I share volume. I'm going to start the video, and I'm going to ask you to let me know if you are hearing the volume sufficient.
Pool shed or a farm than a hotel? Well, that's because it is.
Did anyone hear the volume?
Yes, but I'm not seeing anything.
You're not seeing anything.
No,
Okay, I think.
you have to stop.
Okay,
sharing
yes, I have to
now.
stop sharing my.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Let me stop, and I have to share this separately.
Yes.
Is anyone seeing the video now?
Yes, it's on the screen.
All right, let me start from the beginning.
More like a tool shed or a farm than a hotel? Well, that's because it is. The Platte River Fort here near Greeley is an agro-tourism location. That means it's a working farm, and people can also come stay here and learn more about what farm life is like, all without losing those five-star accommodations. Welcome to a place where the longhorn cattle often outnumber the guests,
He's super, super sweet.
where the rooms move locations with the seasons,
This is a Conestoga wagon.
and life on the farm meets fine dining and spas.
We want people to have an understanding and get the experience of what it's like to be on a working farm and ranch.
You could call Platte River Fort a hotel, but it's more than that.
We're somewhere between a lodge, a bed and breakfast, a small resort.
Sitting on more than 200 acres of northern Colorado farmland,
We have a lot of hiking trails.
it's best to take a side-by-side to get to your room.
We're headed down to what we call Yurt Village.
Yurt tents line the riverbank, filled with beds, pillows, chairs, and yes,
You
wine.
get to feel like you're camping and be in nature, have a nice fire at night, sit by the fire, and yet we kind of do everything for you.
And if a tent, even this tent, is still a little out of your comfort level, maybe a wagon is more your style.
It sleeps 4, it has a king-size bed and a set of bunk beds in it.
Platte River Fort is a working farm, but it also serves a purpose beyond what the land produces.
This creates a really unique opportunity for people to get a new perspective and see how other people that they think are different from themselves are actually a lot more alike.
The property is centered around a replica of Bent's Fort in La Junta, with rooms facing out towards the river.
This is some place to come and have an experience.
An experience that's sure to be an adventure. And you can stay in those yurts for the next couple of months. Once winter comes, they put them away until the spring. But that covered wagon has heating and air conditioning. You can stay in it year-round. In Greeley, I'm Mark Salinger, 9 News.
Okay, did everybody just see that video?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to put back the presentation on screen. Okay, right. So you would have just seen an example of how one farm, this is in North America, would have been able to transform their property into a tourism destination. And so, you know, it does take some amount of creativity. And how can, if you have this interest, how can you make your farming activity, you know, be attractive or of interest to a visitor? And, you know, think about the food that's connected. What are some of the curiosity points around that activity or the food that is produced? Sometimes you may have to work backwards from the food, or you may have to create an experience that involves, you know, several elements that can be incorporated on the particular property or the farm. So we were looking at, you know, various ways that you can have, you know, bring tourism into your farm or your rural location. We're going to start with attractions. You know, how do you, so for example, you have a farm, how do you infuse fun into your farm tour? How do you combine education with entertainment? How do you utilize heritage and culture? And how do you combine with other activities? So it becomes an adventure, right? So those are some of the things to give consideration, you know, if you're going to transform your property into an attraction, you know, what are the points of interest? I was recently speaking to someone, and they're based in Trinidad, and they, you know, have been doing farming, in particular livestock farming, for quite a while, and they have an interest in going into agritourism. And I was sharing with him that in Jamaica, there was a young man that we came across that created a tourism attraction just out of his love for birds. And so out of nothing, he created a space where he had different types of birds and ducks, and he would form alliances with tour bus operators because he was near to a tourism strip. And so he didn't even have an entrance fee, right? So he had a lot of links with the tour bus drivers, and what they would do, you know, he would say, okay, when you're passing by my little place, just stop, just bring them in. They can come in for free. And then when they're finished, if they want to leave a contribution, they can leave a contribution. And he built a tourist attraction out of that, right? And now he is receiving scores of visitors. You know, people want to take pictures with the pretty birds and so forth. So, you know, it just shows you what is possible. You know, sometimes you just start small and you build out. And then we spoke about accommodation, because we mentioned that accommodation was a big thing in Europe. I just saw somebody just mentioned in the chat that the idea can be to have an animal footprint tour. Could the person who put in that in the chat explain what they mean by an animal footprint tour? That is Jody Titley.
Good evening. My brain was just, you know, the idea just came in my brain. You know how certain animals, you know, they would graze on certain plants and fruits and that type of thing. So maybe it's almost like the tour is kind of like, you know, tracking the animal. So, you know, you follow the goats and see what they eat.
So that's very interesting.
And then you would eventually, probably you could do something creative, like, you know, create a dish from these, you know, goats like to eat things like, you call it now, callaloo and that kind of leafy stuff. So it's like you follow their path, kind of see what they're eating, pick some of the shrubs, pick some of the stuff, and then like the end of it now, you would create like a product from it. Something along that line. It's just a little thought that came in my head. So something like that.
Okay, no, but that's the idea, you know. I can't tell you all the many possibilities that could exist. But you know, the ideas come to you and they actually are quite interesting, some of the ideas that I'm hearing. So thank you very much for making your input. So yes, animals, plants, there are many things that can be incorporated. And and as this let me see, make sure I get the name right. As Jody would have just, you know, the idea that Jody just shares, it really is that the limit is your imagination, right? What you can imagine and how you can execute that idea, you know? So essentially the sky really is the limit, or you are only confined by what you can come up with. So, looking at the topic of accommodation, we mentioned this when we were looking at, rural tourism in Europe. You may not have access or be able to build a fancy chateau on your property, but you have tents, right? And there are a lot of hikers and backpackers who don't mind staying in tents. And in fact, as you may have seen from the one, the farm tourism site in North America that we just showed the video on, a tent can be a very fancy thing, right? And there's a concept known as glamping, G-L-A-P-I-N-G, which is essentially glamorous camping, right? Camping does not necessarily have to be very basic and rustic. You can have that are, comfortably fitted out for your visitors. And in Jamaica, there is I don't even know what to call it. I can't really call it a hotel. I can't call it a resort, but it's called Great Huts. And essentially the accommodations are huts, but the huts range from very basic to very elegant. And likewise the price point. So if your price point is low, then you get a basic hut. But if you have enough funds, you can get an elegant hut. It just shows you what is possible with different kinds of ideas. But the place is absolutely amazing. The concept of staying in huts. And there are many different ways you can create unique accommodation. And then of course, now you have the culinary aspect, right? And food has become a big part of the tourism product. And there is a statement here from the UNWTO Secretary General at the time, just speaking to that deep connection between food and rural communities, because the bulk of our food comes from rural communities, right? And so the story about our food, can really be told on farms or in farming communities or in rural communities, right? And it is really to create that greater link between the food and where the food comes from. And some of the things to consider, food tourists have a higher than average expenditure. They're among your more elite travelers. They're very discerning. They don't like sameness. So the culinary offering cannot be bland and anonymous or generic. It has to have personality, right? And then there's a concept known as the terroir. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it properly because it has a French pronunciation, but essentially it's French for territory. And that is what differentiates or gives identity to the food, right? The land from which the food comes. So culinary offerings, also commonly referred to as gastronomy, is in also continuous evolution. And so you can renew what is considered traditional food based on the needs of your customers, right? And then even if you have traditional food customs, it can also coexist with innovation, right? So don't think that you can't completely change or you can't make little changes to traditional foods, so it's appealing to visitors. And then, if you're going to build a tourism venture around your food, you also need to be able to articulate a story around that food, right? A narrative about that food and how it connects to that location where you are and the other elements, for example, culture that come into play. So, food is a big one. People travel for food. you know, the destinations, there are certain destinations that have become known for food, and you know, they're actually having, it actually generates increased food sales within those locations because of the tourism product that is related to the food from that area. So is there any, now I'm going to throw out another question, of course. You would have mentioned the different, mostly fruits, you know, the mango, the guava, the tamarind, that you could kind of build, you know, food routes around. But are there any dishes, as in prepared dishes, that are somewhat emblematic to St. Kitts and Nevis culture?
Saltfish and Johnny cakes.
You know, I say that what fish and Johnny what? Could you repeat?
Saltfish and Johnny cakes.
Okay. Is that a traditional breakfast item, or you just eat it at any time?
I think some people would have it for breakfast or for lunch.
Okay. But saltfish and Johnny cakes. Right, but as I said, you know, think about the dishes that are just, you know, think it's where somebody just said seasoned breadfruit. That sounds fabulous. Breadfruit is one of my favorite things. Conky and goat water. What is conky? Is that conch? Is that from conch?
No,
Miss Abigail?
no, it is made with sweet potatoes and you grated coconuts, sugar, flour, corn, and it's usually made around Easter time.
Okay. And goat water, I'm assuming is like a goat soup.
Conky is what we normally call dukuno.
Oh, but your dukuno.
You're wrapping the leaf. You're wrapping
the leaf. Oh, so that so is but what you say you use, what is your base though that you put in the leaf? What remind me what she said? Is it a sweet potato?
Sweet potato, grated
Sweet
sweet
potato,
coconut, corn, flour, and sugar.
Okay. Because I mean, we have a similar dukuno, but our base is not sweet potato. Our base, I think, is cornmeal. So this one does sound interesting. And then coconut dumplings. Now that sounds fabulous. Okay. Well, as I said, all of these things, I mean, my mouth is watering just reading some. Well, the next time I come to St. Kitts and Nevis, I definitely know what I will be asking for. I'm definitely going to ask for seasoned breadfruit. I'll ask for the conky, the coconut dumplings, and of course the saltfish and Johnny cakes. And I just heard that you now have a mango festival. Okay, and a lot of people have an interest in the mango festival. Carol mentioned the mango festival. And spicy plantains, very nice. Okay, so just to say that, you know, you have your own cuisine and it is special, and you can make tourists, want to eat your cuisine, right? Because there clearly are a lot of very interesting elements in your cuisine. And sometimes it's also just a presentation, just adding a little bit more flair to what is traditionally, how it is traditionally shown, so that it is very attractive to the visitors. But all of these things, should be borne in mind when you are thinking about your rural tourism product. How you include the food, because people have to eat, and they are interested in eating. Okay, so moving on to health and wellness. The farm can also provide the ingredients for a spa experience. And there is a concept of health and wellness or well-being that is connected to nature, to relaxation, because in nature you find quiet, and so that spiritual healing it is easy to make that connection to the rural landscape. Also, there are a lot of spa products that can be grown, lemongrass, mint, cocoa from chocolate, coconut oil, ginger, honey, and I'm sure the list goes on. So I recently had someone call me, and again, it's also about how you use your imagination. I recently had someone call me and they said they were interested, they're in a rural area and they're interested in doing some type of spa-like tourism activity. And he kept thinking, but he's trying to find the right location near to a river. And because we're so used to spas being associated with hotels that are on the seaside, and I had to say to him, you don't need to be beside the water. You can go on a hillside, you can have a panoramic view of somewhere, so we need to get out of the traditional modes of concept of what a spa is, and create a rural spa, with the landscape and the products that we have in rural areas. Any comments on the spa side? Nothing, because you guys have been doing well with respect to, agritourism ideas and culinary, the cuisine and so forth. But maybe those will come shortly. Maybe I see something pop up in a chat to say, oh, yes, we could use this herb or that herb. Oh, see someone has come up in the chat. Yes, yes, for spa. What would you like to add, Carol, with spa? Nothing else? Okay, but yes, there's an interest. In other words, you see the possibilities. Okay. And then, we spoke about the roots in Latin America. And sometimes it's about how you connect different things. So you may have a particular activity, and then someone else down the road is doing something else. And then someone else, over the other side is doing something else. How can, I think someone is speaking. Hold on. I'm not sure if it is Julian that has her mic open or Jody, but I'm hearing some background. Okay, I think they're muted now. Okay. Right. So how can you connect with the people around you to offer some type of route? Because you may not be able to do everything, but maybe your neighbor can do something, as I said, somebody down the road. So think about how persons can can connect their different interests to create a route. And I see Carol just mentioned I'm currently in spa and is now moving into more spa tourism. I'm not sure if the message came across clearly. So I don't know if you want to speak, Carol. Maybe not. Just to explain. All right, maybe at another time. Okay. All right, so just some tips on developing your ideas. Look for, I just realized that there's another video I was to show you. Please excuse the omission. I think I got distracted by all of the lovely cuisine, the St. Kitts cuisine, St. Kitts and Nevis cuisine. You're talking about, the coconut dumplings and the seasoned breadfruit. That I forgot to show you the video, just to show you how interesting the cuisine sounded. But please allow me to share another video, and this is an example of a food tourism site in Jamaica, a rural food tourism site. So I'm going to stop share, and then I'm going to bring up this video. Again, When I am going to play the video, please let me know if you can see video and sound. Is everybody seeing video and hearing sound?
Jamaica's beauty is
Yes.
Okay, all right, let me continue.
Jamaica's beauty is I always say it's really curvaceous, winding and twisting and curving, and you're feeling all those curves. Your senses are going off. You're all excited. It's powerful, passionate love.
PG version.
It's a really nice place to visit.
Stush in the Bush really embodies this whole thought around rustic gourmet. The philosophy in itself is that we want you to learn how to fall in love with your food. It's not just about the food. It's about the entire experience.
It's been a rainy, windy morning. Zionite's farm at Stush in the Bush. What we're gonna do is to gather today's vegetables, greens, herbs, spices, fruits.
Parsley, cilantro, oregano. I'd like to make some fresh chimichurri sauce.
Whatever's gonna be on your menu, it's harvested fresh from the farm. I always describe Jamaica as a power center. There is a powerful energy just springing out of the earth. The connection with the earth is, I don't know, it's intrinsic for me. Oh. Breadfruit is a respect, it's a love, it's an appreciation, and it's also immediately you become a protector of that same earth.
Stush in the Bush is kind of the epitome of Chris and Lisa. The bushman, the Rasta, the down-to-earth with the shishi fufu, New York, Bajan, Brooklyn girl.
Working with my wife is a powerful experience. She would work from sunrise to sunset. She would work out everybody here, including me. Sometimes I have to hide, but that energy is what makes us do what we do and do it very well. I say we are the best at what we do because we are probably the only people doing exactly what we do. An experience where you can come into someone's home or someone's farm, dine with them, learning about the medicinal plants. You're learning about all different types of food. And I can guarantee you, the food you get here, you won't get anywhere else in Jamaica. That I know for sure. Good afternoon. How you doing? Blessed. People just dig a genuine experience. And for us, this is our home. And when we welcome you into our home, we welcome you like one of the family.
It's just who we are. It's what we do. It's what we put forth. Food is at the base of it. Why not have it be its very best?
Okay, guys, here we go.
And why not have it filled with pure love in it? It's a love for Jamaica, a love for the land, a love for great food, and being able to share that experience with other people. That's what you take in when you're at Stush in the Bush.
First two ingredients on all our products, love and affection. Those are the first two ingredients, but I always assume that people know that. I don't even mention it. See, just like stout. If he hears the word love and just gets excited. Okay, boy. All right, okay. Love you too. Yeah, man.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to stop sharing the video.
For breakfast, lunch, or dinner.
All right, so let me share back my my presentation. Just give me a sec. Okay, so that was an example of a culinary attraction, rural culinary attraction, what we refer to as farm to table dining. And it's something that is, has gained popularity. People, and I think there is a hotel in St. Kitts and Nevis that does that quite well. In terms of sourcing local produce from the farm and essentially the menus are built around what is locally available. All right. So let me go back to where I was. All right, so in terms of developing your idea, look for opportunities. Are there gaps that are not being filled? How can you create something new? Scanning your environment for tourism possibilities. So for example, some of the discussion that we would have been having earlier with respect to ideas around agri-food routes, the person who mentioned having a kind of animal footprint tour, these are the types of, possibilities from scanning your environment. Research the history, understand the culture. That also gives you a little more insight into what is possible. Look, if you're really going down the road to develop such an attraction, you have to focus on customer satisfaction, ensuring that you deliver sufficient quality, product quality. Research your market, research what are the requirements for the type of venture that you want to get into. Research what are the needs, the demands, the interests of the clients that you are going after. Whether you're going into the adventure segment, you're going into the culinary segment, you're going into the health and wellness segment. Each of those have market peculiarities, the type of clientele is slightly different, has different characteristics. Consider the suitability of your surrounding environment. What would work, what wouldn't work. You need to sensitize your community so that they don't become a liability to the venture that you are getting into. And then you also could get requisite guidance, create partnerships, test the market, and get feedback. And then, you might need to tweak. And of course, consider safety, security, hygiene. Those will always be important considerations for tourists because they're outside of their familiar zone. And so they need to be ensured that where they're going to is safe, it is secure, and it is hygiene. All right. So even though, what you're offering may be off the beaten track, that doesn't mean that safety, security, and hygiene is thrown out of the window. And try and over time, develop the expertise, become an expert in what you do. Look at online reviews, of other ventures to get ideas. What are the peculiarities of the clients? When you look at the online reviews, then you kind of see the pet peeves, things that people complain about, so that you cover that up when you are developing your own venture. Look at your competition. What are some of the things out there? Look at TripAdvisor, and always try and exceed your visitor expectations. Right? Give them more than what they bargained for, more than what they expect. All right. Hello, Sarah. I just saw a message from you. I'm sorry you're having internet challenges. All right. So we're on to our final agenda item, and we are going to be looking at some agritourism examples, right? And so I'm showing you pictures of a place in Barbados called PEG Farm. So PEG Farm describes itself as a biodynamic farm offering tours, a farm-to-table cafe, farm shop, camping, and workshops on some of the property's practices. The farm is 108 acres, and the farm is geared towards health and wellness. PEG actually is an acronym for People, Environment, Growth. The farm features free-range livestock, cattle, pigs, chicken. It includes a medicinal herb garden, fruit orchard, and other food production and forested area. So people who visit the farm or visit the property can tour the farm and the nature reserve, something that apparently a lot of schools visit. And then they can learn about the property's biodynamic and permaculture principles. And essentially these principles advocate for restorative agricultural practices. And when we say restorative agricultural practices, practices that are environmentally sustainable and have, better ecological outcomes. And so visitors enjoy the tranquil setting and the properties on a hill, overlooking views of the sea. So, it has a very, I can just imagine. I've never been there. I've just, only seen information on the website. But I can just imagine it has a very calming appeal. And then, of course, they incorporate that farm to table concept that I was just mentioning. So a lot of the farms produce are ingredients for the PEG restaurant, which is called Chrysalis Cafe. And it serves innovative and nutritious dishes from the fresh, locally grown food, right? And these are some images from their website, and I've actually put the website link below, pegbarbados.com. And I'm going to move on to the second of our examples. And this one is Belmont Estate in Grenada. And they offer visitors the opportunity to learn about rural Grenadian life through tours of its organic farm, cocoa processing facilities. They have a heritage museum and gardens, and they have a Grenadian restaurant. The estate actually dates back to the 1600s, producing coffee, nutmeg, sugar, and coffee. Due to challenges in the agricultural sector, they sought to diversify their operations and thus opened the tourism component in 2002. This, however, was disrupted by hurricanes, unfortunately, 2004 and 2005, but it resulted in a refurbishing of their facilities. And it would appear that since then, it has just, their business has just grown and grown and grown. So currently, cocoa is the chief product, complemented by a variety of spices as well as rearing livestock. They have a chocolate factory producing what is known as single source organic dark and milk chocolates. They have a heritage museum. They have a goat dairy, which produces goat cheese. The restaurant, their Creole restaurant, is a 250-seat restaurant. So you realize that's a very large restaurant serving local foods. And they have a chocolate bonbon shop and gift shop. And so they offer tours of the cocoa to chocolate process, tours of the tropical gardens and farms. The estate employs approximately 80 to 100 workers and receives 25,000 visitors per year. The company has been recognized regionally and internationally as a best practice in agritourism and has played a pivotal role in Grenada's tourism industry. And so what they have been able to do is create a union of tourism, food production, and the environment. Recognizing that this linkage is driven by the visitor's interest in good food, which is then connected to good farming practices, and then ultimately a great holiday experience, right? So I would just like to close on that thought, how you create these linkages between what is available in your rural community, your farm, and how you will then use that to appeal to your tourists or visitors. I hope I have some comments or questions on what we have shared over the past essentially hour and a half. I hope it's something that piqued your interest, that you may have ideas flowing as a result of listening to some of this presentation. So I would like to see if there are any questions or comments on some of what we have presented. Okay, let me probably ask specific questions then, because it looks like you remain relatively quiet until I ask a specific question and then the chat just blows up. Do you think some of the rural tourism activities that we would have discussed, I would have just presented, Do you think that they can work in the context of St. Kitts and Nevis?
Yes, I think that, especially with the part where you're saying that you could have it as a tourist attraction with the farm. I think they were trying to do that in Nevis. There's somebody that name Ambas. She have like some 400 or something acres, something like that. And something like that they were trying to do, to my understanding. So it is possible. You just got to get the workers, the money, and the land.
Okay. So possibilities are there. What do you think? For example, I know a lot of people when we start having this discussion, how do you create these sorts of opportunities? What would you propose that your governments would need to do to assist, a greater rollout of rural tourism activities?
Well, first of all, they need to have a vision. Seems like they don't have any. And if someone that has the vision and comes to them, then they should listen to them and then, put the money into it, because if you want it to be something that is remarkable and rememberable, you have to really and truly put money into it. And that's just the thing. I don't think that they take farming here in Nevis not as a joke, but not that serious. And the only thing to do with tourism, they feel like, to me, is the sun, the sun and the beach, something like that. So they don't take certain things like farming serious, like St. Kitts, as you mentioned, that there's a hotel, Mount Travers, where they provide their own fruits and vegetables. They try as much as possible, and trust me, it's lovely, and they have a tourist attraction, even the locals. But here in Nevis, no.
Here on Nevis, I'm sure you could find something on Nevis. But okay, you have mentioned in terms of monetary resources, that could be one way that the government could assist. Cynthia Brazer in the chat has mentioned land. How do you make land available? Someone mentioned that utilizing the hot bath stream. Is that the one in Nevis? I think there's, correct me if I'm wrong. Yes, okay, fine. I think I know where you're talking about. Okay, so there's always ways in which the authorities can facilitate. But sometimes it also takes one or two enterprising people to kind of charge the way forward. Does anyone here, I see there are 42 participants. Does anyone here think that they could do it? That they could set up agritourism or rural tourism venture? Or would have that interest? Okay, I've seen people in the chats. Someone said definitely a future goal. Another one said I will. Another one said I have great interest. And then someone mentioned about, in terms of how you facilitate, how could authorities facilitate tourism in terms of, rural tourism, mentioning about the land issue that, St. Kitts and Nevis came out of sugar, that land could have been distributed for agritourism. What is the sugar lands currently being used for? If I can ask, someone can volunteer that information. Can anyone tell me what the former sugar lands, how they are currently being used?
Housing, a lot of the old stacks are just being left to ruin. They have holes in them, hurricane, storms, weather. They just, it's like, they're almost gone. Many of them are just in ruin. So It's like we have to kind of figure out now, try to, you know, capitalize on what we have, because other than tourism, it's also our history.
Right, correct, very correct. Okay, okay. But you know, as I said, it's to really look around you to see what is available. And sometimes it really is creating something out of nothing, you know. A lot of rural tourism activities, you know, they start that way. You know, you don't necessarily have to have a lot to start. You don't necessarily have to have hundreds of acres to start, right? It's really how you can see the thought. But any other comments or questions? Someone said even the sugar factory could have been preserved for tour sites for tourism. And you know, it's something that I didn't mention in my presentation, but when you look at the literature on rural tourism and some of the benefits of rural tourism, or just tourism generally, I once came across a comment that tourism can be considered the great conserver. If it wasn't for tourism, a lot of historical sites would have just died, and this is around the world, right? But once you establish a tourism attraction around a historical site, you are in event preserving that site, you know? So tourism helps to preserve a culture that would otherwise have been lost if we did not utilize tourism around that site, you know? So sometimes we have to think about what do we need to preserve, right? What within our heritage and culture do we, and I'm going to give you an example, right? Right now, as I speak, okay, so I would have mentioned this rural tourism course that we did across the Caribbean earlier this year. And we had a guest presenter that actually operates ecotourism business in Dominica. And one of my students reached out to me and said, you know, she's so sorry that she didn't know that he was a guest presenter, because she's not in Dominica, but she has been trying to resurrect the traditional mass in Dominica. And it's something that she's actually gathering information on across the Caribbean, the masquerades, right? And these would have been the traditional forms of revelry that were brought from Africa. And most Caribbean countries have some element of it in different ways. Some have been merged into carnival, some were Christmas celebrations, but in several countries, like for example, I can tell in Jamaica, it is a dying culture. And presently, as a result of her doing the course, we connected with the tour operator in Dominica, and we are connecting with one of the masquerade groups in one of the rural communities in Dominica. And we are trying to develop a cultural attraction. And on the basis of this is a culture that if we don't find a way to preserve and allow people to earn from, in another couple of years, it could lose its relevance and just phase out and be overshadowed by things that are more popular, more current, and so forth, right? And this is just somebody who has just a passion for research in that particular cultural item, and she sees how it can be used as an avenue for tourism and for earning revenue for rural communities. Just to give you an example of how you can use tourism to preserve things that can over time be lost, right? You mentioned some of the sugar estates, the sugar factories, etc. There may be other things. There may be other things, other parts of your heritage or your culture that over time you could lose, but tourism can help you to preserve those facets. So, those are some of the things that, you can think of. And if you have a particular passion for an area, you know, if I'm speaking on behalf of someone who was just a student like you in an agritourism, in a rural tourism course, and she, you know, just out of sheer passion and interest, has used that now to motivate the masqueraders in this particular community to develop an attraction out of it. So, as I mentioned earlier, the possibilities are endless. Anything else anyone would like to say? Any comments, questions, or do I need to ask another question to get comments? Do you think there's need for these types of tourism alternatives in St. Kitts and Nevis? Do you think that sorry, someone who, I'm not sure who is speaking?
Seldine.
Oh, hi, Seldine. Please go ahead.
I feel that there is a need because especially the fact that St. Kitts went to a tourism economy. Right now, the current slogan, I believe, is venture deeper. And
pardon, could you repeat the slogan?
Venture deeper.
Venture deeper, okay.
And I feel like we lose a lot. I feel like there are many opportunities to be had that could highlight, you know, ecotourism. We have a beautiful island, St. Kitts and Nevis, and, you know, we don't really, and I think unfortunately as well, a lot of this stuff gets caught up in politics because, for instance, I live in Deer Bay. There's all of these sugar stacks all over the place and they're going to ruin. Now, if I were to go say I have interest in it because this is what I want to do, then they'll say, oh, it's $3 million US, when the place is falling to ruin the day before I express any interest in it, you see? So it's like, how do you break that barrier and be able to have this conversation without feeling like, okay, no, we're reserving it for, you know, the upper echelon financially, but in the meantime, it's an eyesore in your town.
Well, as I said, I see the point you're making, and it's I don't necessarily have the answers, you know, but sometimes it requires a level of sensitizing the authorities as to what is possible, you know, because, you know, not everybody necessarily will see the same possibilities. And if, for example, some of what ICA has done is try and sensitize tourism authorities as to the possibilities from the agriculture side and the rural community side, you know, so that there is, you know, people start to see, you know, beyond what they're accustomed to. So, but yeah, these are things that, you know, if you are in the position to lobby or to have this type of dialogue with the authorities, then please do. Right. So, you know, if people can make use of these assets, you know, allow them to. But as I said, the conversation needs to occur. If everyone sits in silence, then essentially nothing will happen. And that's why we do these presentations, we do these courses, so more people can have the idea and essentially jump on the same bandwagon, you know, to make these the opportunity of rural tourism a reality. If there are any other, I don't know, Latoya, I'm kind of at the end. I'm not sure if there are any other questions or comments. If there's anything else that I should do before we close.
I think that is fine, but what I would like to add is I think that a lot of persons in St. Kitts and Nevis, sometimes when we have different development, they are not advertised properly. For example, we do have a new venture in agritourism, and it is known as the Layamiga Natural Farms. It's actually located in one of the highest peaks in St. Kitts, and it's more of an eco-friendly farm. They have a cabin that persons can overnight. They also do the farm-to-table approach, and so persons have to pay for tours. However, because of where it's located in the mountains, they have specific vehicles that actually get tourists there. Some of their tours actually start from about 100, I think, and 169 US per tour. And I think that is the local rate for local individuals. So for those who are interested in looking and seeing what it's about, you can go to their Facebook page. You can just type it in a search engine. It's Liamiga Natural Farms, St. Kitts.
Well, I've just written it down and I will definitely be checking out the farm.
Yeah, so you guys definitely, I was actually trying to get us to get a tour there. Unfortunately, they only allow about 16 to 18 persons, I think, daily on the farm.
Wow, so it's a real high-end tour.
Yes, it is.
Wow. Okay,
And they provide
okay.
lunch, etc. It depends on how much you pay. However, it starts at 100, I think, and 50 something US dollars. So it could be extremely expensive.
Okay, okay. Well, I mean, as I said, I know I'm gonna try and tell you the name of the hotel. Well, I think most of you would know that hotel, and someone at one of their participants mentioned it. That could be another option if you wanted to do a tour to see what farm to table dining is like and so forth. So there are some bright spots across the Caribbean that are doing this, and they're doing it well. You know, when you go on TripAdvisor, they get very good ratings. So just to show you that, you know, if you execute well, you will get the patronage. And I mean, even the site I showed you, the Belmont Estate in Grenada is one of those examples. I mean, you know, the amount of tourists, they receive thousands of tourists, right? And even the one I showed you from Jamaica, the Stush in the Bush, when you go on TripAdvisor, you go on those rating sites, you know, when you see some of the reviews, it's like people have an out-of-body experience when they go there, you know? So if you do it well, and you will get the clientele.
Agreed.
So I think we're at the end. I hope the session was informative, and I think that's why you can share the presentation. And if persons need additional information after the fact, through Latoya and the other Helen's daughters personnel, they know how to find me.
Definitely.
Because people have done that. People have heard about the presentations that we're making at ICA, and you know, someone will say, boy, I need to talk to you, and we're always available. So if someone wants to speak off air, we're available.
Yes, definitely. So I think if we have no more questions, concerns, I think we can close for the night. I don't see any questions. Oh, additionally, sorry, before we'll do some housekeeping after I say thank you to Ms. Brandon, being that tonight is the last and we have some activities coming up. If you ladies could kindly stay online so we can do some discussions. Ms. Brandon, I really want to thank you so much. Your presentation was extremely impressive, and I must say it really have a lot of us thinking, because St. Kitts and Nevis, we have that sort of natural touch, I say natural elegance to a lot of places that what we take for granted, tourists might come and see it as heaven. And I think it's really enlightening to look at the value of what we have around us and actually be able to do something about it. So I want to thank you so much for all of the ideas. I think they truly enjoyed the presentation that was shared with different countries to which we can relate to. And I'm sure some persons here are probably mind is still ticking as to the many ideas they can do for the different areas that they live in. So I really want to thank you for enlightening us and for making us want to actually do more with St. Kitts and Nevis, our little paradise, and actually be a part of the agro-tourism venture. Thank you again. I don't know if anybody else would like to say anything before Ms. Brandon leaves.
Well, thank you for having me. It has been a pleasure. And as you have said, all the words you have said, Latoya, it's about how persons can, you know, build on what they have for their own country. So I will depart at this time, but it was a pleasure being here. And I look forward to the next time I can visit St. Kitts and Nevis and have some of the cuisine that you mentioned. I will take notes so I know what to ask for next time. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Definitely, and please look for some of us too.
Okay, sure. I don't know when next I can be there, but the food really it's interesting. The food is very interesting. I definitely want to try some of what you mentioned. All right, have a good evening, ladies.